welcome to Pure Hustle Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're on episode 409. This is a themed episode.
That's right. And we love our themed episodes because it's our chance to talk about what's going on specifically in one topic of reselling. So we have our update episodes where we do a lot more broad, general reselling news updates for us. But in our themed episodes, we talk about like a specific category of information. Maybe it's shipping, maybe it's listing, maybe it's sourcing. And today we're going to be talking about unpopular opinions that we might hold as resellers. So one of the things I'd like to do right off the bat, if you're not already, subscribe to our channel, you haven't hit that bell notification, do those things. But also in the comments below, before you watch anymore, let us know what are some like unpopular opinions you feel like you have about reselling, maybe things that you think about like deeply held beliefs or feelings about reselling that you feel like other people might disagree with. Let us know in the comments below and see if any of those come up during our discussion today.
Now, I want to take it one step further because it's not just what people think about resellers. It's what Mike and I. Now, a lot of these were my thoughts. So if Mike wants to separate from me on these, I'm okay with that. But this is unpopular opinions in the reselling community, right? So this can go broad, right? It could be unpopular opinion that just affects everybody, or it's unpopular opinions that people in the reselling community would probably have a problem with. Maybe they won't listen to Pure Hustle podcast anymore after today. But I just want to be real with things because I feel that you can get caught up in all these YouTubers and all these podcasts like Mike and I and so on, that they try to say all these things and they're just not true. It's part of it is maybe it's just a way to get more engagement, maybe get more clicks on a video. Maybe it's because people just don't know. Maybe people speak out of ignorance, and so these may be unpopular opinions. They may be popular with our listeners because if you've been listening to us for a long time, a lot of these things we've been saying, you're like, yeah, of course, we agree with that. This is why we listen to you guys. So the first one, though, I think this affects everybody because all the time you'll hear this. This makes the rounds. I think on Instagram and TikTok and even on the news sometimes is the fact that reselling hurts the poor. And I make the counter argument that I actually think reselling helps the poor far more than it ever. I don't even think it hurts the poor. I think it helps the poor. I know. I'll let you start, Mike, on this one. Do you agree with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's maybe a couple of different aspects you got to look at. So one of the big pushbacks that you get, and this one might not be unpopular in the reselling community, but it would be an unpopular opinion of maybe a normie who's not a reseller looking in at reselling, and they would say, resellers, you often hear, when you're buying things at a garage sale in a thrift store, you're hurting the poor. And yeah, I disagree with that. And there's maybe two facets or two different ways in which reselling it can actually be super beneficial to quote unquote the poor, and we're using that terminology because that's oftentimes what you hear when people say like you're just taking away from people who need it. So one of the ways is most people who get into reselling, they don't get into reselling because they're a trust fund baby or because they've got millions in the bank and they're like, you know what, I've already got everything I could possibly want. What could I do to like get more at even cheaper price? Now people do that, but typically reselling isn't the way they do it. Most people who go into reselling are people who they need the money, right? Like most people who start the side hustle of reselling, it's because, you know what, I can't afford this hobby that I have. And so maybe I'm going to start as like a part-time reseller to make this hobby meet. I can't afford my car payment. I can't afford, grocery prices keep going up. I wish there was a way to make extra money. And there are ways to make extra money. You could drive Uber, you could deliver pizzas, you can donate plasma. But one of the things that a lot of people latch onto, and it's one of the most successful ways, is reselling. So when people do reselling, they're doing it as a way to help themselves and help their family, right? So that's one side of how it could actually help the quote unquote poor, is because most people who are starting because they're quote unquote poor. Like they need the money. They don't have just so much excess money. The reason they do the reselling in the first place, they need it. And the other side of that is there's a lot of people who need things cheaper and they can't necessarily find it. Like if I'm looking for a specific thing, I need a certain size shoe. And I want a work boot at a certain size shoe. If I just walk into my thrift store, the chances I'm having the boot that I'm looking at, the size that I'm looking at, is almost 0 to none, right? Dang it. All of them that I find are a size too big or a size too small, or they're not the right like style. So what's the best alternative if you can't afford to go buy it brand new, is to get it used. And the best way, and pretty much the only way that that happens, is because there are people who are going and they're searching and they're sourcing and they're basically becoming like a personal shopper for people all over the world. And so it's yeah, we're taking a markup because we get our time and energy is involved and invested in getting that item and listing it, taking the pictures and shipping it. But at the same time, the customers who are buying things used from us are still getting them at a cheaper price than they would get them if they got them new. And it's a much more likely chance that they're going to be able to find the item they're looking for. Now, Goodwill and those kind of places are starting to sell some stuff online, but even still, resellers are a huge gap filler in the market of connecting people to the inventory they want. So yeah, I would definitely say that on both sides of that, and kind of going back to that idea of donating plasma, like one of the things when people donate plasma is they get the like, hey, I'm making money doing this. So most people, that's why they donate plasma. They're not doing it for altruistic reasons, but then they also get that like side, like the whole time, all the posters in the buildings and the ads that you get on emails, like come donate plasma, is like you're helping people. Like the plasma you donate, you get to use, it's helping people in need. And in a lot of ways, like that should almost be the motto of resellers. Not only are you making a little bit of cash for yourself to help you make ends meet, but you're also helping people in need. You're helping connect items to people. And maybe it's not the exact same if it's like, hey, I'm selling like high-end Pokemon cards. That might not be, necessarily helping people in need, but you're still connecting people to items at a cheaper price than they would otherwise get it.
Yeah, but I also I want people to think about the bigger picture, right? I think sometimes people just look in a narrow view of things and they go, "Oh, you're going to the thrift store and you're buying things that poor people would have bought, and you're just you're filling up your cart and there's nothing left, right?" And there's two ways to look at it. Well, there's two correct ways to look at it. Okay, the first correct way is there's always stuff left over. Like there are thousands and I would say millions of pounds, right, of clothing and shoes and everything that get thrown away and wasted all the time, right? We've seen the pictures from Chile. We've seen, the huge dumpsters. We've seen news reports of certain thrift stores that they throw away about 90% of stuff that's donated. So there's so much. And so what do resellers do? Well, we go in there. This is the second correct view. We go in there and we continue to provide revenue for these businesses, right? Goodwill, right? They take all this money, and what they do is they employ people, right? People that normally wouldn't be able to get a job in the corporate world, or they help people out of living, from the streets to finding some transitional space. Same thing with the Salvation Army. Same thing with a lot of these thrift stores. And so what we do is we go in there and we provide that revenue. We continue to allow these businesses to thrive. I think about even the last few years since 2020, how thrift stores have just exploded, right? They're everywhere now. Thrifting is a big deal. And you may be like, well, yeah, that's because of thrifters and it's not because of resellers. And the difference between a thrifter and a reseller is people that thrift, it's for fashion, right? They want to get that vintage stuff. They like that, that kind of, they want a certain look from the 90s, whatever. And so instead of going to eBay, they'll go to a thrift store. And a lot of people could say, oh, those are a lot of wealthy kids, or it's, it's Gen Z. But still, the fact that they're going in these stores and they're making these purchases allows these companies, right, even the for-profit ones like Savers and so on, to be able to donate and have charities that they work with that end up helping the poor. So overall, this argument to me is dead. I think it comes out of a place of ignorance, and that's just my 2 cents on, when people say reselling only hurts the poor. All right, Mike, I'm gonna ask you this one. I'm gonna give my 2 thoughts. Do you think it's easier to work a 9 to 5 than be a full-time reseller? Now I know you're not full-time, but after watching me, what are your thoughts?
It sure depends, and I think there are going to be some exceptions, but I would definitely say just a traditional 9 to 5 job is going to carry a lot less pressure and stress. Maybe some fewer freedoms and things in that sense, but at the same time, you go in, you clock in, you do your work, you clock out, you go home. You're not thinking about work 90% of the time. You're just doing your own thing. You go and you can kind of compartmentalize your life a little bit more. I would definitely say when you're a full-time reseller, man, you've got the pressure on you to constantly make that money, right? Like it is on 24/7.
Yeah, and the reality is, yes, is there time freedom? Is it nice to be able to just plan out your vacation when you want, to be able to drop everything and go to your kid's baseball game? There's all those, right? The benefits of all that. But the bigger picture is, I would say even as a part-time seller, there's no such thing as a part-time reseller, because even when you're part-time, right, you're answering messages, you have to ship items on time, you have to source at a certain time, and if you let those slide, well, your sales will slide, right? And as a full-time seller, yeah, the pressure is immense, right? There's no benefits, right? You have to figure out your own insurance, your health insurance. There is no 401k, right? So you have to invest, right? You have to be wise about where you invest. There's also the idea that there is no true paid vacation. Now, I've said before in this podcast, right? It's kind of nice to sell on eBay and be full time, or especially when I do Amazon FBA, where I can go and travel for 2 weeks and I do nothing and I'm still making money. But it took a lot of work to get to that place, right? And somebody had mentioned in the comments, I think it's Benny who always comments on our YouTube, and I appreciate all his comments. I had said that I wonder how long you could sell on eBay without listing. Like, could you go 12 months? Right. I said, well, if I ever make it rich in crypto, we'll do that experiment. We'll do the podcast and I'll just source, but I'll never list. And we'll see how long I can go before the store completely dies. But the reality is, it's a grind. It is truly is a grind. And we actually had a live 2 weeks ago where we discussed this, where the idea that the 9 to 5 is the enemy. I don't know if it's the enemy. I think, yeah, there's a lot of bad things about the 9 to 5, and I've kind of forgotten a lot of those because I haven't been in a 9 to 5 in over 7 years. Or I haven't had to answer anybody. I've had no deadlines to meet. But I have something that watches over me, and it's called the eBay algorithm, right? I have to always be listening. I have to always be communicating back. I have to accept returns. I have to deal with customer service. And when it's full time, right, you have to make a lot of decisions that you wouldn't want to make as a part-time seller, right? So, for example, this weekend I got a lot of lowball offers, and things were kind of slow, and I kind of had to take some of them because if I didn't take them, like, there would be $0 for the day, right? It would have been horrible. I maybe would have made $40, where it would have been easier for me to just, well, in California, work at McDonald's and make $20 an hour, right? Because in an 8-hour shift, I can make $160. But if I didn't take those offers, which eventually led to more offers, and I ended up making 300 to 400 that day. I can't remember. I would have been better off doing something else. I would have been better off finding a gig job on Craigslist, working at a convention or something, right? And I think a lot of people forget. I'm going on a on a diatribe here, but I want people to get away from that idea that is always being pushed on social media. I see it on X a lot now, not just with reselling, but this whole idea that the 9 to 5 is like the end of humanity. That it's doom. That if you do the 9 to 5 and you work, well, you're lesser than a human. You've given into the matrix. But the reality is, you get to enjoy your weekends, right? You don't have to worry about things. You get to have a time that is pretty much spaced out for you to spend with your kids. Now, if you're a salaried employee, it's a whole different conversation, right? I'm talking about 9 to 5, which most people, even if you're salary, now in California, there's even like overtime if you're salary. And so I want people to be aware of that. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, there were times when I'm still a full-time reseller, but when things were going really well, that I would say there's no way that the 9 to 5 is better. I mean, I would work like 20 hours a week. There would be some days I didn't list. It was great, but those times have kind of changed, and maybe we will get back to those times. But I would say, as of right now, I would make the argument that a 9 to 5 is far easier than being a full-time reseller, and that's my unpopular opinion.
Yeah, no, that's good. And for some people, sometimes it's the way to go. I mean, yeah, there is that aspect of like you're a wagey, you're a wage slave, like whatever term you want to use for that.
Wagey?
Yeah, wagey. But at the same time, that might be what's best for you. I mean, there's a very select group of people who can break out of that, and if you can, great. Like, it's one of those things, like, most likely you're never going to make it to like the highest levels unless you're willing to do something different. But not everybody's trying to get there. You know what I mean? And that kind of lifestyle isn't for everyone. But yeah, you won't make it to that level unless you're willing to do something different and take some big risks. So another thing that we often find and people will say is they discuss the difference between everything resellers and kind of more niche down specific category resellers. And Orlando and I, the type of reselling that we do is what we call everything store. So Orlando and I do most of our sourcing at garage sales, thrift stores, Facebook Marketplace, random connections that we've made. So the inventory that we're sourcing on the regular basis is extremely random, right? Like we might specialize in something, like maybe, you really know shoes, or you really know a certain type of shirt, or you really know a certain type of electronic a little more, but your store kind of consists of like a hodgepodge, a little bit of everything. And a lot of people will make the argument that an everything store is not the way to go. You really got to niche down. And there's definitely a lot of validity. But what I often hear in these kinds of discussions is like an either or, like one way is significantly superior to the other. And the reality is, I think there's pros and cons to both. And as an everything reseller, one of the things we hear a lot is you're going to have inconsistent sales being an everything reseller. You're not going to be able to make as much money. You need to really niche down into one specific field. And again, there may be some validity to some of those arguments, but from our experience, one of the benefits of being an everything reseller is, because we're so diversified in the inventory that we have, if one market tends to drop or dip, and another one picks up, our store is still going to be doing fine. And so it actually kind of lets us like spread the risk, as it were, and potentially capitalize on lots of different categories. Maybe right now, shoes aren't selling as well as they were, and we had a whole bunch of dress shoes, and it's just for whatever reason, or a certain brand. But at the same time, this random electronic that I have, they're flying off the shelf. And so you actually can have a little bit more consistency. Now, it may take more items. You might not be selling in as much volume, or you may not be able to source specific things. But by having so many items kind of spread out a lot among a lot of different categories, you're kind of providing a little bit of security to the fluctuations in a market. As Whatnot, we talked about Whatnot on our Monday Live. And when something like Whatnot comes around, and so all of a sudden clothing prices drop, well, if you're an everything reseller, it's not going to necessarily hit you as hard because you've got other categories that are helping to fill that gap.
Yeah, and I find that the bigger YouTubers really push this idea of having everything niche down, and I think there's value to that. I like you said, I think if you have a following of customers, maybe you have an email list that you developed over time, you have consistent buyers. I think it'll give you consistent sales. But there are plenty of people that are everything sellers that continue making money. Now, you do have to have a larger store. You do have to have items that people want. I mean, that's anything in reselling. But the reality is that you can have consistent sales, but it's gonna it takes a grind. It goes back to our whole, is it more difficult than a 9 to 5? It is, especially if you're an everything store, because if you're like one of those individuals that, let's say you only do t-shirts. Like I think about like Tekken Sports, like his, the best eBay out there, I guess I would say in the secondary market, right? He had it down, right? Vintage clothing. He knew what to source. He listed 300 items a day at his peak, right? And they were the same kind of items. And so he had a loyal following. And so he always sold stuff, right? He had hundreds of sales every single day, right? But if you're an everything seller, you have to do that on volume too, right? You can't just list 5 or 10 and expect to have consistent sales. And I say that about myself too, that I can't be mad at myself if I'm only listing 5 or 10 items a day and I'm like, oh, things aren't consistent, especially in this time frame that we're at. All right, now, hey, before we move on, something that is consistent is your taxes, right? There's two things you can count on in life: is you're going to die one day and you have to pay taxes. And one of the things that definitely helps you as a reseller is this tool made by resellers called My Reseller Genie. If you haven't signed up yet for My Reseller Genie, I strongly encourage you to do so, especially as we're going to reach Q3 and Q4. Things are going to get busy. What it allows you to do is software for bookkeeping. You can import everything from eBay and from Poshmark. You can see, what your shipping costs were. You can see, your cost of goods. It allows you to track your profit and loss. And then when it comes around tax time, you have a lot less work to do. Or you could be like me, who doesn't always keep tabs on stuff, and I just let it run in the background. And when it's time for my taxes, I spend a lot less time trying to prepare because everything's already pretty much done as far as the inventory and the selling and the eBay side on My Reseller Genie. So if you haven't checked them out yet, go to the link below and My Reseller Genie, use our code Pure Hustle, all caps, for 15% off the first month. Again, that's Pure Hustle, all caps, one word, 15% off the first month at My Reseller Genie. All right. So I'm not really sure where people are going to land with this, but this is there's like a twofold thing with what I'm going to say here. One is I don't think if you want to scale that you have the option of not either social networking or networking, meaning you can't be an island. Like maybe there's that person out there that has been able to buy everything off of eBay or whatever it is, but the reality is if you want to scale, if you want to grow your business, if you want to grow in knowledge, you have to either A, be in social media, or did I say B? A, and then B, you have to network, right? It doesn't mean you have to be on social media, but you have to at least be out there giving your business cards out, making connections with people, or else I think it's very hard to scale. I would say Mike and we always talk about this. I won't even talk about it a lot, but a lot of people ask us all the time, like, hey, Orlando, how much money do you guys make off of YouTube? How much money do you make on, marketing? How much money do you make on your Patreon and so on? And I would say we don't make very much, but where we do make a lot of the money is from all the connections that we've made. Right? We've had people DM us and say, "Hey, by the way, there's this person in San Diego. They're trying to offload some of their inventory. Maybe you should check them out." Or we get on our Discord, we get people that share bolos all the time. We get individuals that share the hustle of the week, or they give tips, and it's made us tons of money, right? And if you haven't signed up for our Patreon to get onto our Discord, I strongly encourage you to do so, because here's the deal: it's only $5.55 a month, and you're gonna make that money back very quick. I mean, talking about our hustle of the week today, some of the brands that we're gonna discuss and what we're gonna share. Like, if you find any of these, you're automatically gonna make a good amount of money, and so that's where social media has played an important role as far as we go. But that's anybody, right? I mean, there's plenty of people that don't post every day, they don't have a podcast, they don't have a YouTube, but they're on social media and they follow other resellers and they learn what to do, what not to do. They learn about the ongoing trends. Or there are people that aren't even on social media, maybe they just listen to a podcast, but they have connections where they have someone that will hook them up with vintage clothing, or hook them up with some private label items, or they have a constant flow of inventory, and that's because they got out there and they networked. I think if you want to be a reseller and you want to scale, being an island and being on your own, I don't know if it's possible to be able to scale at a great level.
Yeah, and then beyond just that, like you kind of alluded to and mentioned too, is just the learning aspect of it. If all you use, even if you're not trying to network, even if you don't, make those connections through social media and don't have business cards, which all of those things can be extremely valuable, just what you're going to see if you're on Instagram or you're on, TikTok or you're on X and you're following certain people, your feed is going to be full of the things that are just going to give you tons and tons and tons of advice and like tips and tricks, and those it's you can't even put a dollar value on how much you can learn that's just free out there. And you're 99% of people are on their phones on social media anyways. You might as well make your feed that you're getting be something that's actually going to be beneficial to you, and not just funny cat pictures or whatever it is you're watching or looking at. Our next one here, this one might hit.
Can we land there for just a little bit? I want to touch on this a little bit more.
Go for it.
Is that okay? So I want to talk about like all the people that have listened to the podcast, right? Or have been in the Discord and so on. I would say there are countless stories of people saying, I never thought about this until I listened to the podcast, or I never thought about this until I watched Craigslist Center, or I never, considered picking this up and I had the score of a lifetime, right? Those opportunities have only come across, like you said, from knowledge. If anything, if you can just be a lurker. It doesn't mean you have to have a whole social presence on social media. Doesn't mean you have to, even set up a username that's reselling. You could be user 983492, and just doing that, you're going to gain a lot of knowledge. So I want to encourage everyone to do that. Again, doesn't mean that you have to be on there every day. Doesn't mean you have to, be addicted to in social media. It just means maybe once a week you can even check it out if you don't like it. But have some way of learning, and that's free. Number one, it's free, right? Everyone that's selling courses out there in social media, what they're selling is things that are already free, right? All they're doing is compacting everything and they're giving it to you in a package, and you're paying for the service of all their knowledge And then on top of that, that they organize everything for you. But the reality is, if you're consistently on social media, you're listening to podcasts, you're on YouTube, you're networking, even when you're out in the field. When I'm out, with other resellers, at a garage sale or something, I ask questions. This other day I was at a garage sale, and somebody they're picking up like it was fabrics, right? And actually, Vintage Mermaid, who's one of our great followers, she talks about fabrics all the time, and I know zero about fabrics. And actually, one of our major hustle of the week today is a fabric. But just talking to other resellers, especially those that know about this, like, now I know what to look out for, right? I know certain brands, I know what textures to look out for. And so I just want to encourage people again, as much as reselling allows you to be an island, don't be that island. I think, Mike, this may be a two-part episode. Like, we might have a part two.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, I think we've got a lot of interesting topics here we're talking about, and I think this would be one worth diving into a little bit more. But we got a few more we can do here, plus our hustles of the week coming up. So if you are still listening, keep listening. Don't give up yet. So our don't give up
It's like,
on it.
it's like an arduous task to listen to the podcast.
Well, especially with this next one coming, because I feel like this might hit a nerve for a few people.
Okay.
It is very easy to blame others for our problems, right? Like, that is just a human nature. Everybody does it. And one of the things we see a lot in reselling is a tendency to point the finger at platforms, especially a platform like eBay, right? Now, we have been very clear on the podcast that eBay has its flaws, eBay has issues, that we are certain that there are a lot of times when eBay has messed up our stores or our sales, and we've been taking the brunt end of that. However, when it comes down to it, the unpopular opinion we have is, if you're failing in reselling, it's not eBay's fault. Right? It's not eBay's fault. Now, of course, there are going to be exceptions where you had a store, everything was running good, something weird happened, you got like suspended for something you didn't do. Next thing you know, you're like shut off. But when it comes to being a reseller, if you've already got the inventory and you've sourced the right things, even if the worst case scenario, like cataclysmic, like eBay has completely suspended your store, you can still make it as a reseller. And if it's just, hey, my sales have dropped, even more so, like, reselling is a skill. It's a learned ability. And if you've sourced the right things, if you are able to get things at a good price, you know how to deliver them to customers, there's other platforms you can use, or there's even on eBay, there's things you can do to tighten up your listings, to help get your store moving again, even if it involves I'm not saying if you're suspended, you should open up another account, because that's probably against their policy. But even if it means maybe starting some things over, trying something different, maybe getting a new store if you're not a suspended account, but if for some reason something's wrong with your store and you think, there are things you can do. And 9 times out of 10, it's not the exception that we're talking about. 9 times out of 10, it's our own mistakes. It's, hey, you know what, my prices are just a little too high. Maybe I sourced the wrong things. Maybe I'm not getting things shipped out on time. Maybe I shipped too many things that were not as described. I'm not doing good on my descriptions. I'm not taking my time when I'm doing my listings. And those are the things that more often than not are what's causing the problems. Again, I know for a fact, and if you've had issues that are legitimate eBay issues, feel free to talk about them in the comments below. Like, I've kind of backstepped a little bit. I think I've made some comments in the past where I've said, like, no, there's no such thing, like, that doesn't happen. And then I've had people in the comments, or people in our Discord that I trust, and they've said, well, actually, this happened to me in this way. And it's like, oh, okay, well, things do happen. Like, there are times where stuff's out of your control. eBay has messed up your store, has messed up an item, and they haven't sided with you, and you're getting the raw end of the deal. But at the same time, if you're absolutely failing as a reseller, it's just because there's probably mistakes you're making, which that's not a bad thing. Like, when it comes down to it, in a lot of ways, that should actually be a freeing truth. Like, if that is true, because that means you have control. You have control to fix the things that might be wrong in order to move you to become successful, right? Like, the silly, not silly, but the trite phrases that people use about, failure is just a learning opportunity, or fail forward, and as much as those things can be annoying to hear people say, there's a lot of truth in those, that it's, you can take, hey, man, my store is really slowing down, or for some reason these items aren't selling. Okay, well, maybe you need to learn a new category. And if you're the type of person who's going to make it as a reseller, there are going to come times in your reselling career where you're going to have to make big shifts and pivots in order to remain successful. And eBay can't do that for you. You've got to do it yourself.
No, agreed. And it's, it's that old saying, misery loves company, right? And so in the reselling space, you can find the negative people, right? All you have to, I always joke about, you can go to e-commerce bites, look in the comment section. You'll see all the failed eBay sellers that are just complaining about how it's all eBay's fault. And listen, for every person that says like eBay failed them, eBay doomed them, you can find tons of other people that are being successful, right? I think about individuals all the time in our Discord that are just killing it. And anytime I want to go in there and I want to type in a woe is me scenario, like, oh, eBay did this and things are falling off, I read those comments. I'm like, I'm not going to put this. Why? Because it's my fault, right? The fact that I'm not successful at times is because maybe I've been lazy. I haven't listed as I should. Maybe I haven't adapted. Maybe I didn't tweak things the way I should have. Maybe the stuff I'm sourcing is the wrong stuff. Maybe I'm relying on knowledge from a year or two ago. Maybe I'm using systems that have already been pretty antiquated by the standards of eBay, because eBay is constantly changing. And to blame eBay, to me, I think, I don't want to say it's silly, but I think it could be not the correct approach if you want to be successful, right? Because you can find a way. There's again, there's people that comment all the time, like, Orlando, you don't only have to use eBay, right? If you're struggling at reselling, you can use the other platforms. You could go and go to a swap meet. You could go to a flea market. You could do local deals. Like, there's different ways of doing it. To say that, hey, my reselling business has gone to the end because of eBay, that's not being fair to eBay. eBay has their own business. eBay wants to do what they want to do. I don't agree with a lot of things. There's a lot of issues with eBay, especially lately. But the reality is, if I'm not doing well as a reseller, it's because I am choosing to keep those systems that haven't worked for me, and I need to switch things up. It's not easy. I still struggle with it. I'm not great about it. I've had a very terrible summer, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily eBay's fault for things not going well. All right, hey, we talked a lot about the Discord here, so I just want to give everybody an invitation that's listening. If you haven't gone to our Patreon, please do so. It's only $5.55 a month. Helps us to continue doing the podcast. Taking time away to produce the podcast, to come up with ideas, to shoot the video, to be on social media, all takes time away from our reselling businesses. And so just $5.55 a month allows us to continue producing this free content for everyone. And along with that, when you sign up, you get to go on the Discord. And I got to tell you, there is so much knowledge on the Discord. I try to be there on there as much as I can, but I like it when there's a span of time when I haven't been able to be on because I'm on vacation or got a lot of family things, and I jump back on and I'm like, wow, look at all this that was shared. Like I didn't even know about these things, right? Whether it be Bolo's Hustle of the Week, encouragement, shipping tips, how to do retail arbitrage, how to sell secondary goods, all these different things. It's on our Discord. And to me, I don't know about all the other ones, but I believe that all of ours that are on the Discord are genuine resellers. They do this. A lot of the full-time people are very real about their day-to-day, what they find and what they do. And so jump on over patreon.com/PureHustlePodcast, or you can go to the link below and sign up for our Patreon. Also, you can find us on social media. We are Pure Hustle Podcast on all socials except for X. We are Pure Hustle Cast. We're also going live on Pure Hustle Cast on X, so you can join us there when we do our lives. Also, you give us a call, 619-738-1170. That's 619-738-1170. Or shoot us an email at purehustlepodcast@gmail.com. And as always, if you're listening to the podcast and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to our YouTube. Our goal, I think Mike and I agreed, we'd love to get to 10K before the end of the year. I think it's very doable and possible. Maybe we just need something to go viral and we'll be there. But, if you haven't yet, jump on over. And thank you for all of you that drop iTunes reviews. Always helpful. That 5 stars and that detail lets other people know why they should tune in. All right. Are we ready to talk about some major scores here?
Yeah. We got our Hustle of the Week section. So here we go.
Come on, hustlers. It's the freaking Hustle of the Week.
All right. So our
Come on, hustlers. It's the freaking Hustle of the Week.
let
We just wanted to do it
Come on,
twice. Talk about
Yeah, I
hustlers.
got it.
hustle three
It's the
times.
I got it on the loop there, man. All right. So and normally I would just edit that out, but I won't be able to do that this time. So unfortunately,
It's all good.
or
We're keeping it
fortunately,
real.
you heard the hustle of the week sound effect a couple times there. All right, let me pull back up. I had get my notes off so I could turn that off there. All right. So our first hustle of the week comes from Aaron. IG handle is Aaron underscore Burton 82 on Instagram. He says, "Hey guys, not one of your normal big hustles, but for me, this was my biggest so far in my 8-month eBay selling history. So bought from a charity store in the UK for uh, $1.70 a pound. One pound 70 is a pound. It's $2.19 in US dollars, and sold. It was a Port Marion Botanic Garden Cafetiere coffee pot with sunflowers, and sold it for a US dollar amount of $54.92. Wow. So from $2 to $54 plus shipping. This was by far my biggest markup to date. And that's the thing about hustles too. I mean, even the hustle I'm probably going to give today, it's not always about like, hey, I sold this for 1,000, I sold this for 400. Taking something from $2 and then marking it up to 54, that's an incredible markup. Like that's what makes a good hustle. So that is an incredible find there. And yeah, I'll have to check out that brand, the Botanic Garden coffee pot. Nice.
And this is one of our listeners from across the pound.
Across the pond.
They say pound across the pond.
We were thinking pounds because
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's what it was. Aaron from, is that Leicester?
Leicester, UK. Let us know. Let us know in the comments.
Let's
Help
not
us spell it out
comments.
phonetically.
Okay.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate that.
Just
Hustle of the
ignorant
week.
Americans here.
Yeah.
All right.
Uncultured.
Uncultured. All right, our next hustle of the week. So this was crazy. So this is from our Discord. This is from AM2106. They've shared a few other hustle of the week in the past. And so this one, I was like, there's no way we can't share this. And so said another hustle of the week that I was waiting for the return window to pass. That's always very important. I sometimes do that because when I post on social media, I'm scared that the person that bought it will see it and go, "What? They only paid $2. I'm returning this." But that probably never happens. Said I saw some fabric listed on local online auction site. It was 2 yards of Scalamandre, SCALAMANDRE tiger print upholstery fabric with very low bids. I did a quick comp and it looked like a premium fabric, so I decided to bid. Ended up getting it for $3.50 with the bidder's premium. That's a really good price. Usually bidder's premium is like 10% of the value you got to pay on top of that. I couldn't find anything exactly the same, so I listed high at $1,160. So 2 yards of Scalamandre tiger animal skin velvet multi-purpose fabric in 3 months for a best offer of $1,000. I've been holding my breath until the return window passed.
Ooh, that's wild too. And 2 yards is actually not that much fabric. Like it's a lot. Like space, you think like, okay, it's like 6 feet of fabric. But the reality of like folded up, it's not taking up a lot of space. When people are doing big projects, they often need several yards of fabric. So the fact that you were able to sell something 2 yards like that, I wonder what they were using it for. I mean, you said it was upholstery fabric, so I wonder if they were reupholstering a chair or something. But man, to think $1,000 from $3.50, holy cow.
And
I
the
feel like
reason go ahead.
I was gonna say, I feel like I need to learn a little bit more about fabrics and what makes certain ones better than others. I mean, I used to work at Joann's fabric store, so I've done my fair share of cutting fabrics. But man, I never cut a fabric worth that much. That's for sure.
Well, I did some research because I was like, wow, why, right? Why is so much? And so, Scalamandre is, if I'm pronouncing that right, is one of America's most beloved textile brands. This is from theinside.com. The heritage fabric houses nearly century-old legacy, has made it an ultimate destination for interior designers and decor enthusiasm alike. Founded in 1929 by Italian immigrant Franco Salamandre, its enduring cultural impact and the red zebra icon extends from the Kennedy White House to iconic movies such as The Royal Tenenbaums. I was like,
Wow.
no idea. So
No idea.
that is definitely a hustle of the week.
Right.
All right. What you got next here, Mike?
All right, our next one comes from KAK from our Discord. KK says, I was on vacation last week at the beach. I always check Facebook Marketplace wherever I'm somewhere new. Saw this post for 16 pairs of dress shoes and boots, but it didn't say what type of shoes they were. She was getting rid of them for a neighbor who had died. I thought they were Allen Edmonds and took a chance since they were all free. Turns out they were all Allen Edmonds, Rancor, and Aldine. I sold the Aldine for $499 as buy it now, and so far 4 others for $79 to $109 each. Plus, they all had XXL Allen Edmond cedar tree shoes. I've sold 2 lots of those for $35 each. Holy smokes! $499 for a pair of shoes? That's bonkers.
Well, the thing with Alden is most of their shoes are shell cordovan, and that's why. And shell cordovan is I think it's horse leather, and it doesn't wrinkle, like it doesn't crease, right? You get like that wavy look on it, and so people like it because it's durable. And I've sold some Alden shoes for about $500 back in the day too, but to get it for free, that's insane. And that it paid probably for your vacation, that's even better. This is why I fly Southwest, because I get 2 luggage for free, because you just never know when you're going to be sourcing. So
Yeah,
there you go.
awesome.
Nice work.
Yeah. All right, so mine is much less fancy than any of those, but again, kind of goes back to our first one of sometimes it's just the markup. And I sold just the other day, I sold a Columbia shirt that, once I sold it, like, man, that one was actually kind of cool. It was kind of like a Hawaiian button-up type shirt, but it had lots of, I think it was tuna was the fish on it. Like it was a fishing shirt, right? And so it had this fish printed all over it, and it was like super bright color. And I know that I picked this up for 50 cents, right? Like, so I sold it for close to 30, I think, once you included shipping, and shipping was super cheap on it. So again, it's just that markup of buying something for so cheap. And it's sat in a storage bin for, probably a good year and a half now. But the fact that something can sit for that long, be purchased for so little, and then still sell $30, it of course isn't the biggest sell I've had recently, but as far as markup, it was probably the biggest markup sell I've had. And those are always kind of little victories you got to be willing to take and celebrate too.
No, I get that. I get that. Listen, I want to encourage people that are new. Like, anytime you can buy anything for super low and sell it for super high, like, that's a win. That is a hustle of the week. Especially if you're new to reselling, like, you really don't think about these things, right? Before I became a reseller, I was like, there's no way you could find something for $2 or $5 and sell it for that much. But no, the reality is, like, happens all the it happens for 350 to 1,000 too. That's what's crazy. So, all right. So mine is it's kind of an interesting one. So I had shared how I'd gone to this home and they had a lot of stuff, and I've already made a killing. I've paid $250. I got it was a floating paddleboard that I sold for 100 something. I sold a who's that artist that does things with like Campbell's soup? Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol. I sold an Andy Warhol book for $200 something. I sold 2 paintings from this place for $800. Like, it's been like in the money like forever. Along with that, they were big Kansas Jayhawk fans, and they had a ton of Kansas Jayhawk stuff. Now, a lot of these things were long tail. I knew they were going to long tail because they were going to have to be somebody who really is a big fan, right? And so, I picked up all this stuff. I picked up like ticket stubs, and one of the things I picked up was there was like this framed piece, and it had 2 tickets, I believe, from the 2008 National NCAA basketball games, Division I. And they had a Sports Illustrated magazine cover, and on the cover, it's one of the players, Mario Chalmers, hit a last 2.1 seconds remaining shot, and it pushed Kansas to go into the national title and win. Okay, and it was a big deal, right? It's called the miracle shot. Like, I'm not a Kansas fan, but I know this because of all the research. Okay, this is like Pawn Stars. All right, I did all the research before. It's not like I'm not like Chum Lee, who like off the top of his dome is able to say all this stuff. So I picked this up, and I was like, I don't know what the price is, because the magazine by itself maybe worth $30, maybe. The 2 tickets by themselves maybe worth $50. But as a package deal, all framed, all ready to go for you to put on display in your home, if you're a big Kansas fan, probably worth more. So I listed it for about $500. and I took an offer of $400. Right, it's already been on the private, so it sold for $400 plus ship. You know, the crazy thing is, I was able to like find out who the buyer was, and you know they live in Kansas. They're probably big Kansas fans. And then I looked up a news story, and here's I think this is maybe why there's an uptick in popularity. But I guess the player, Mario Chalmers, who, and I hope I'm saying that right, who shot the shot, the NCAA keeps playing that video over and over and over again, but they never paid him. And so this July, a lawsuit was against the NCAA for not paying them for the use of that video, which I don't know if they'll win, because usually when you shoot a video or you take a picture, the owner is the person that did it, not the individuals involved in the picture or the video that you made. So anyways, that's not legal advice, by the way. But I'm just very happy, because now I'm like, all right, if this person was really happy, if I get a good feedback, I'm probably going to message them and say, hey, by the way, I have a basketball that's been signed by all the players that I haven't even listed. I have a few more ticket stuff. I mean, what happens is I can actually sell everything I have maybe in one swoop. And I've done that before, where I've noticed somebody buy a big ticket item, and I reach out to them and I say, hey, it seems like you're a big fan. You know, that was an awesome item you bought. I have these other things I haven't listed. Are you interested? And then they've just bought all those too. So it's something to think about, you know, to maybe make that a bigger hustle of the week.
Man, that was a way better story than my tuna shirt.
That's okay, but that's reselling, man. Like, dude, I remember. Listen, one of my first shirts that I sold, okay, on eBay, when I actually went to a thrift store, and I remember it was such a good feeling. I paid $4, and I bought an RJC Hawaiian shirt. It was a Las Vegas like casino Hawaiian shirt, so I had like a roulette table and poker chips and all this stuff. And I remember I listed it for about 40 bucks, right? And this was the only reason I knew about this. There was a show called Thrift Hunters, and they had Jason Smith, and I forget the other guy's name. And it was on A&E, and it was after Pawn Stars. And I remember watching that show, and that's kind of what got me on this whole reselling thing a little bit. I remember watching it, I go, there's no way anybody can do that. And sure enough, I went to a thrift store, and I bought a Hawaiian shirt, and I listed it. And I remember the feeling going, wow, like $4, and I sold it for 30 bucks. I was like, who wears this stuff? Who buys this stuff? And it's such a great feeling. So that I don't think it ever gets old. I mean, I sell Hawaiian shirts all the time, and I'm like, why did somebody buy this one? Like this one? So yeah, Mike, listen, it's part of the game. It's part of reselling. So all right, hey, we're maybe touch on like a couple more, and then we're gonna go into our part 2, huh? Next week. Or not next week, 2 weeks of our unpopular opinions.
All right, sounds good to me.
All right, so this one, I've recently come to this realization, is that listing consistently does not guarantee sales. And this may be anecdotal, but I got to tell you, in the last 2 years, there have been times I haven't listed for a week and my sales continued. There have been times where I listed for like a month straight, nothing happened to my sales. My sales stayed at the same. I'm actually right now, my sales, I think I'm like 30 to 40% less than I was a year ago, right? As far as eBay goes. Luckily, I have other platforms, and I also have some other side income that comes in. But it's been brutal, right? And it's not like my listing has become any less. I actually list more now than I have before, and I just haven't found that it's consistent. And it could be for multiple reasons. Maybe I'm listing things that don't sell, but the reality is I don't source that. I always source things now that have great sell-through rate, that do well. It could be the size of my store, but I have found that listing every day isn't the answer. I don't know what the answer is. I do know if you pick up stuff that people really want and have great sell-through rate, that it'll sell. Like I just picked up a whole bunch of Batman cards that were sealed from 1994, and I listed it, and within 24 hours, I already sold a box. Right, and I'll share that as a hustle week in a few weeks from now. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? You think I'm off on that?
No, I think again, this is one of those things where it's not just a clear black and white, but I think the way you phrased it is really good. Is you said listing consistently doesn't guarantee sales, and I think that's probably the right way to phrase that, because there's this misconception that consistently listing will guarantee sales, but I think that probably the better way of saying that is listing consistently increases your odds of sales. Right now, I do think that the algorithm plays a part of that, being active on eBay. In fact, I have this theory. I'll probably talk about it on our next update episode, but I have a theory even buying on eBay with your account
Really?
will increase sales, right?
What?
So there are things that the algorithm tends to like to show preference towards, or to kind of maybe boost items, and seems to be activity on your store is one of those things that is going to potentially push customers to see items they might not otherwise see. You'd be higher up in the search engine. Um, so I would say that there is that aspect that listing could help in that sense. There may be some element of help there. And just the reality of like we talked about back in the beginning of the podcast, is if you walked into, you're like, oh, I really need bread, and you walk into the grocery store, and on every aisle of the grocery store and every part of the grocery store is just milk, and you're like, oh, well, this is the milk store. And so you go to another store and all they have is rice, and it's like, well, I guess that this store has nothing but rice. Like you're the chances of getting what you're looking for is a lot less if you only have one thing in there, right? And it's the same thing that applies to an everything store like us, or just a store that's got a lot of items listed. If you only have one item listed, unless that is the hottest item and you can source it almost indefinitely, um, you're going to, if you've got 10 items in your store, there's less chance of getting sales than if you have 100 items in your store. And one of the best ways to get to 100 items in your store is by listing, right? And 1,000, you're going to have more sales than if you only have 100. So there's that just law of math. Like if you've got lots of items in your store, the chances that there's somebody out there looking for one of those items goes up, as opposed to if you've only got a smaller selection of items available in your store. So there is an aspect of listing often is just going to boost the number of items. But if you're a person, going back to that theory you had, or that, how do you test this? If you've got, let's just throw a big crazy number out. Let's say you got 10,000 items in your store. Well, if you've got items that people want at good prices, you probably don't have to list for a while, and you're going to be racking in sales, and sales will be coming through because you just happen to have the items people are looking for. So listing an extra 10 items when you already have 10,000 items in your store might not necessarily bring in any more sales than you would have gotten anyways. So yeah, I don't think that hey, as long as I'm listing 5 items every day consistently, I'm guaranteed to get sales. And nothing's a guarantee, right? There's no guarantee in anything in life, really. But I think that it does help. And so I think it's just better to have that right perspective of, hey, is that way, again, you're not getting mad at eBay and saying, but I did the thing. I listed 5 items every day for the last week and I haven't gotten any more sales. Like, well, what's going on? Well, maybe you're listing the wrong kinds of items. Maybe it's not at good prices. So, or maybe nobody's looking for those things. So it's not just as simple as list and you'll get sales. Otherwise, yeah, we could all just list fluff items that aren't for anything other than to just boost sales and other stuff. And that's just not how reselling works. So I think having a proper view on it will help a lot of people not have that disappointment when all of a sudden they're not getting the sales that they're anticipating.
Agreed. All right, and maybe hopefully people have tuned out by this last one, because I'm not sure everybody's gonna like this, but I'm a big believer that reselling isn't meant for everyone. And let me give a little bit of kind of a background to this. I think this is true for everything, right? Whether it be people that are teachers, whether it be individuals that are doctors, nurses, lawyers. Like, not everyone's called, or not everyone is given the skills or the intuition to do certain things. And I think reselling is one of them. Now, this is going to go into what we're going to talk about in our next theme episode in a couple of weeks. That's going to be more of our unpopular opinions. But the idea that just because it's not meant for everyone doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. And what I mean by this is that, being a full-time reseller, I do think takes a certain amount of grit. Like, it takes a certain amount of determination, certain amount of passion. You have to really want to get out there. You have to really want to source. You have to really want to list. You want to, it's something that's like part of who you are. If you're a person, you really hate doing those things, reselling is going to be really tough for you, right? I don't think you can build that passion. Everybody likes to make money. So don't get me wrong. Like, when that dopamine hits, you're going to want to do more. But when that dopamine hits stop, right, and you go 3 or 4 days without a sale, or you get that terrible customer that it wants to return a $300 item and there's nothing wrong with it, and they end up leaving you a negative feedback, then it's going to be like, all right, do I really want to do this? Is this really what I'm meant to do? And then other individuals, there's like kind of this lack of attention to detail. In my experience in the last 10 years, even dealing with my son, or dealing with other people, I've actually had people that I have mentored to be resellers, and they just didn't have it. Right? It was like I actually gave a group, I gave them a photo box, and I actually hired them, and like I had them take pictures for me about all the stuff that I wanted listed, and I had them upload it and make drafts. And it didn't matter how many times I told them, like, you need to make sure it's in a square, make sure you take this amount of pictures, make sure that when you're in the listing you do this, make sure that in the shipping you do this. No matter how many times I said this, it just I don't know, they didn't catch on. It just wasn't their thing, and eventually I did have to let them go. Right? And there's other individuals that I can just one time just say, hey, this is what you got to do, and they run with it. Right? They get it, they understand it. There's something about them that they understand the detail that it takes, because I will say reselling does take a lot of detail. It takes detail from the sourcing to the listing, to the inspection of the item, to especially the shipping. You got to pay attention to detail, like from weighing it to how you pack it to make sure it doesn't get damaged. When you got to be in detail about how you communicate. You have to be very aware. And I just think for a lot of people, it's very overwhelming. And so if you're one of those places that, hey, Mike, Orlando, we've been listening to a podcast for a long time, I've been trying to do this reselling thing full time, and it's been really tough. That's okay. Go to part-time, or you've been part-time, right? And you're like, Orlando, I don't know. Like it's been tough. I can't find stuff all the time. I get kind of bored. I get tired of having to look stuff up. I get tired of listening. Then find something else, right? Not to get into a whole motivational thing, but there's this book, Good to Great, by this individual named Jim Collins, and he talks about, like, in order to make money, to really like be something that you enjoy in life, you have to find something that's your passion, right? But it has to be something that you can monetize, and it has to be something that you could do well, right? And if you could do those three things, right? Passion, monetize, do well, then you're good, right? And so if you don't have passion, it's going to be hard to be a great reseller. If you're having trouble like sourcing or finding things that are going to sell well, then you might struggle. Or if you struggle with the ability overall to do it really well, like it's gonna be tough. And so just think about this thing. I'm not telling people to walk away from reselling, but think about it as a vehicle. We're going to talk about this in the next theme episode, but as a vehicle to whatever next step, whether it's a vehicle for you to pay off your student loans. We've had people here that, they didn't love reselling, but they were able to do real well and pay off some of their student loans. And then they went to real estate. Right. And there's other people that, they enjoyed reselling, but after a while they realized they didn't have the grit to, continue being a full-time reseller. And they went back to a 9 to 5, and they're like, you know what, I'm going to do part-time. Anyway, Mike's thoughts on this before I keep going on and on and on.
Yeah, no, honestly, I could probably rant about that same thing for a while, but yeah, I agree with everything you say. Stamp of approval, and part of that is just hopefully encouragement to people out there. Like, if this isn't for you, that's okay. Like, I think a lot of people get into something and then they feel really bad getting out, right? Like once you've already told, it's like when you tell everybody, hey, I'm going to do this thing, and then now you kind of feel stuck doing it. Hey, I'm a reseller. This is how I make my money. And then there's a fear of like, well, you know what? I don't love this. Maybe I'm not as good at it, or I am good at it, but yeah, I don't have the passion, or I don't, it's taking too much time. I would rather do this other thing instead. There's no shame in that. Because I think what a lot of people do, and I think what maybe the reason we haven't been able to be like super financially successful as a podcast and get, become those gurus, is because we're not sitting here saying like, everybody can do this. This is easy. You're going to make lots of money. This is because I think you're selling a dream. And I think, most of our listeners see through that. And so they'll receive this well, like, hey, you know what? It's okay if this isn't for me. And, we probably shouldn't be trying to spread it like it's the gospel. I feel like there's some people who are like hustle evangelists, where they're out like trying to knock on doors, convert everybody to become a hustler, to become an entrepreneur. And that's not necessarily what we think is necessary. I think it is a incredible tool that can help free a lot of people from, debt and all kinds of burdens they have in their life, and free up time. But it's not a panacea. It's not the tool for everyone. It's not going to fix everybody's problem. So those things keep in mind. And I think if you do that, then you're going to be it's much more likely that you will be successful in reselling if you understand what it takes to be a successful reseller.
Yeah, I like the tool analogy. It may be just a tool to help you in the meanwhile, or to the next big thing that you're supposed to do. because maybe you're supposed to be doing something else, but maybe you just need to make a little bit of money in the meantime, or a lot of money that reselling can bring to you. So hopefully you found our unpopular opinions agreeable with you, or at least let us know in the comments. If you're like, Orlando, Mike, you guys are way off, let us know. I want to hear. I want to know. And maybe we'll discuss some of those comments in our next theme episode in a couple of weeks, where we have part 2 of our unpopular opinions about reselling. Thank you all for tuning in. If you haven't yet, make sure to hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed, make sure to subscribe. Thank you to everyone that's caught us on the podcast. Appreciate every single one of you. And with that being said, make sure to be real,
Be relevant,
and be reselling. Ladies.
Peace.